Many people think that having a large vocabulary means being good at English. They believe that the more words you know, the better your English will be. However, this idea is not completely accurate. What truly matters is how flexible you are with the words you already know. Being able to use a limited number of words in different ways can be far more valuable than knowing many words that you rarely use. Imagine someone who knows thousands of words but struggles to form sentences when speaking. They may hesitate, feel stuck, or even forget how to use those words in everyday situations. On the other hand, someone with a smaller vocabulary may speak with more confidence and clarity because they know how to use their words effectively in different contexts. This flexibility in communication is what really makes the difference and helps people communicate more naturally. In fact, mastering a language is not about the number of words you memorize, but how well you can use the ones you already know. Learning to be flexible with your vocabulary allows you to express your ideas, even if you don't have a huge collection of words at your disposal. This means that even with a limited vocabulary, you can still communicate smoothly and clearly. Being able to think of alternatives when you forget a word is a very useful skill. Think of language like a toolbox. Having many tools can be useful, but if you don't know how to use them correctly, they won't help you much. The same goes for words. You might know a lot of them, but if you can't apply them well, they won't improve your ability to communicate. It's often better to have a smaller set of tools that you can use effectively than a large set that you struggle to handle. When you improve your flexibility with language, it's like learning to use those tools in new and creative ways. This doesn't just help you with speaking, it also improves your writing and your ability to understand others. By mixing and matching the words you know, you can adapt to different situations and conversations. You won't need to rely on memorizing new words all the time. Instead, you can make the most of the vocabulary you already have. One common misunderstanding is that knowing more vocabulary automatically makes someone better at English. This can cause people to spend too much time memorizing words without learning how to use them properly. But language is not just about knowledge, it's about communication. Being able to think quickly and use your words in a flexible way is what really counts in everyday interactions. For example, if you are in a conversation and can't remember a specific word, you can still find a way to describe it using the words you know. This is the kind of flexibility that is essential for becoming a fluent speaker. You don't need to pause the conversation to search for the perfect word. Instead, you can work around it by using other words that convey the same meaning. This ability to adapt is what helps keep communication flowing smoothly, even when your vocabulary is not perfect. In language learning, the focus should be on mastering the words you know, not just adding new ones. By doing this, you will find that your confidence grows, and you will be able to express yourself more easily in a variety of situations. The key is to practice using the vocabulary you have in different ways, whether it's through speaking, writing, or even thinking in the language. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes to use those words flexibly and creatively. To sum up, having a large vocabulary does not automatically mean that you are good at English. What's more important is being able to use the words you know in different ways. Flexibility with language allows you to communicate effectively, even with a smaller set of words. By focusing on how to use your vocabulary well, rather than just expanding it, you will become a more confident and capable English speaker. When it comes to language learning, many people focus on accumulating resources, such as vocabulary words, grammar rules, and learning materials. This collection of knowledge is what we refer to as resources. However, there's another concept that's even more important, and that's resourcefulness. Resourcefulness is the ability to use these resources in a smart and flexible way. It's about knowing how to apply what you've learned in practical situations, not just having a stockpile of information. Think of it this way: you could spend years learning new vocabulary words, But if you don't know how to use those words in conversation or writing, then they're not really useful. Resourcefulness is what allows you to take what you know and apply it effectively, even if your vocabulary isn't as large as you'd like it to be. For example, let's say you're in a conversation and you forget a specific word. Someone who is resourceful will find another way to describe the idea using simpler language. They'll use synonyms, rephrase their sentence, or even explain the meaning in a creative way. This ability to think on your feet and adapt to the situation is what makes someone truly skilled in a language. Resourcefulness is a skill that can be developed over time, just like learning vocabulary. It involves practicing how to communicate using the resources you have, rather than relying on memorizing more and more words. In fact, constantly focusing on gathering more vocabulary can sometimes slow you down. If you're always thinking about learning new words, you might forget to practice using the ones you already know. This is why developing resourcefulness is much more valuable than just accumulating resources. It's about quality over quantity. You don't need to know every single word in a language to be fluent or to communicate effectively. Instead, you need to know how to use the words you do know in a flexible and creative way. This is what will allow you to navigate conversations, even when you don't have the perfect word on hand. One way to think about the difference between resource and resourcefulness is to imagine two people at a hardware store. One person buys every tool in the store, thinking that the more tools they have, the better they'll be at fixing things. The other person only buys a few basic tools, but they know exactly how to use them in different situations. When something breaks, the second person can figure out a solution with the tools they have, while the first person might struggle even though they have more tools. This analogy applies to language learning as well. The more resourceful you are, the more capable you become of handling different situations with the language skills you already possess. It's not about having a large vocabulary, it's about knowing how to work with the vocabulary you have. This means being able to use words in various contexts, explain ideas in different ways, and adapt when you're faced with unfamiliar situations. Developing resourcefulness also makes language learning more enjoyable. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the idea that you need to learn hundreds or even thousands of new words, you can focus on becoming more skilled with the words you already know. This approach helps you build confidence, because you'll see that you don't need to memorize endless vocabulary lists to be able to express yourself. Being resourceful also helps you in situations where your language skills are put to the test. For example, if you're traveling in a foreign country or speaking with someone whose first language is English, you might not understand every word they say. But if you're resourceful, you can still follow the conversation by paying attention to context, picking up on keywords, and using what you do know to fill in the gaps. This adaptability is what truly makes someone fluent in a language. To sum up, the key difference between resource and resourcefulness is that resources are what you know, like vocabulary and grammar, while resourcefulness is how you use that knowledge in practical situations. Being resourceful allows you to communicate effectively, even when you don't know every word or rule. It's a skill that can be developed with practice, and it's far more valuable than simply accumulating more and more resources. By focusing on becoming more resourceful, you'll improve your language skills in a way that's both practical and empowering. If you want to become more resourceful with your language skills, there are specific methods you can practice to improve your flexibility. These methods focus on helping you think in new ways and make the most of the vocabulary you already know. Here are 3 key techniques that can significantly improve how well you use the English language. The first method is to learn words the right way. Many people rely on simply memorizing the English and Chinese definitions of words. While this might help you pass tests, it doesn't always help you use the words correctly in real situations. A better approach is to focus on understanding the English definition of the word and learning how it's used in various contexts. You should also pay attention to phrases or expressions that native speakers use with those words. This deeper understanding will help you become more flexible in using the words you've learned. For example, instead of just knowing that the word run can mean to move quickly, you should also learn its other meanings. Run can mean to manage something, like running a business, or it can mean something is operating, like a machine running. By understanding the different ways a word can be used, you will be able to communicate more clearly and naturally in different contexts. The second method is to practice paraphrasing and intentionally accumulating new ways to express ideas. Paraphrasing means explaining the same idea in different ways. This is an important skill because it allows you to work around situations when you forget a word or when you need to explain something complex in simpler terms. You can practice this by reading or listening to sentences and then trying to rewrite or say them in your own words. The goal is to get comfortable with expressing the same concept in different ways, using the words you know. For instance, if you hear the sentence, "The weather is terrible today," you could paraphrase it by saying, "It's really bad outside because of the weather." This exercise strengthens your ability to express ideas more flexibly. Over time, you'll naturally start picking up new expressions and ways of phrasing things as you encounter them in conversations or media. To support this, you can also keep a list of new phrases or alternative ways of saying things. When you hear something interesting in a movie, a TV show, or in daily life, write it down. Over time, you'll build a library of different expressions that you can draw from in conversations, making you more resourceful in how you speak. The third method is to avoid over-reliance on translation tools and bilingual dictionaries. Many people fall into the habit of using these tools whenever they don't know a word. While it's okay to use them occasionally, over time, relying on them too much can prevent you from thinking in English. Instead, challenge yourself to think in English as much as possible. When you come across a word you don't know, try to figure out its meaning from context or look it up in an English-only dictionary. This will help you stop translating every word from Chinese to English and encourage you to think directly in English. It can feel difficult at first, but this method helps you develop a natural feel for the language. You'll begin to understand English in its own terms, without constantly comparing it to your native language. The more you practice thinking in English, the easier it becomes to express yourself fluently without needing to pause and translate. Each of these three methods, learning words deeply, practicing paraphrasing, and reducing reliance on translation tools, helps to improve your flexibility with language. By focusing on these techniques, you'll find that you can use English more naturally and communicate your ideas more effectively. Flexibility is not about knowing every word. It's about being able to adapt and express yourself with the words you do know. When it comes to language learning, many people believe that the more words you know, the better you will be at the language. However, this is not always true. The real key to becoming proficient in a language is resourcefulness, or the ability to use the words you already know in flexible and effective ways. No matter how many words you learn, it's impossible to know every single one in the language. That's why being able to work with what you have is much more important. Think about it. You could study vocabulary for years and still not come across every word you'll need in every situation. But if you're resourceful, you can handle conversations or written communication even when you don't know the exact word. Flexibility helps you keep conversations going, avoid awkward pauses, and continue expressing your ideas smoothly. This adaptability is what allows you to be a good communicator, even with a smaller vocabulary. One of the biggest advantages of being resourceful is that it gives you the confidence to express yourself, even when you don't know all the words. For example, if you can't remember the word carpenter, you could say, "A person who builds with wood." If you forget the word ingredients, you could say, "The things you use to cook." These are just simple examples, but they show how resourcefulness allows you to explain your ideas without being stuck. It enables you to think on your feet and use alternative expressions or explanations to convey your message without hesitation. Another benefit of being resourceful is that it helps you overcome moments where you get stuck during a conversation. If you only rely on your vocabulary and forget a word, you might pause and lose track of the conversation. But if you have developed resourcefulness, you can find another way to say what you mean. This ability to keep communicating, even in difficult situations, makes you a more effective speaker and listener. You become adaptable and resilient in your communication, which is a key skill in mastering a language. It's not about perfection, it's about maintaining the flow of communication. Resourcefulness is also essential for real-time conversations, like when you're talking to someone face-to-face or over the phone. In these moments, there's no time to stop and check a dictionary or translation app. You have to rely on what you know and how quickly you can adapt. By practicing your ability to think of alternate ways to say things, you'll be better prepared for these situations. You'll feel more at ease and confident, knowing that you can handle whatever comes up, even if you don't have all the perfect words at hand. In fact, this kind of quick thinking and adaptability is often what separates advanced speakers from beginners. On top of that, resourcefulness can help you enjoy language learning more. Instead of feeling stressed about not knowing enough words, you can focus on using the ones you do know creatively. This takes some of the pressure off and makes the learning process more fun. You'll start to notice how much you can accomplish with a limited vocabulary, and that can be incredibly motivating. Language learning becomes less about memorization and more about communication, which is the ultimate goal of any language. So, why is resourcefulness more important than resources? Because no one can learn every single word or phrase in a language. There will always be new words and expressions you haven't heard before. But if you're resourceful, you don't need to know every word. You just need to know how to work with the words you have. This skill will help you overcome gaps in your vocabulary and still communicate effectively. In fact, many native speakers don't know all the words in their own language, but they are still able to communicate well because they know how to explain things with the vocabulary they do have. In short, language learning isn't about having the biggest dictionary in your head. It's about being flexible, creative, and confident with the words you do know. That's why resourcefulness should always be a priority in your language learning journey. You'll find that as you develop this skill, your ability to communicate will improve dramatically, and you'll feel more comfortable using the language in any situation. Whether you're giving a presentation, having a casual conversation, or writing an email, your ability to adapt will make you a more effective and confident communicator. If you want to improve your flexibility in English, the good news is that you can start right away with a few practical strategies. Flexibility in language means being able to express your thoughts clearly and effectively, even when you don't know all the exact words you need. It's about thinking on your feet, paraphrasing, and making the most of the words and phrases you do know. The more you practice these strategies, the more natural they'll become, and soon you'll notice a real improvement in your ability to communicate in English. The first step to improving your flexibility is to build a strong foundation by learning new words, but in the right way. Instead of just memorizing words and their translations, focus on understanding the meanings of words in English. Learn their definitions, how they're used in sentences, and what other words are often used with them. This deeper understanding of vocabulary will help you use these words more naturally in conversations. For instance, when you learn a word like run, don't just memorize its definition. Understand that run can mean to move quickly, to operate something like a machine, or to manage something like a business. This kind of knowledge allows you to use the word correctly in many different situations. Another powerful way to improve your flexibility is by practicing paraphrasing. This means finding different ways to say the same thing. Paraphrasing is a key skill for language learners because it helps you communicate effectively even when you forget specific words. If you can't remember the exact word for something, you can still explain the idea in other ways. You can practice paraphrasing by taking a sentence or a piece of information and then trying to rephrase it in a few different ways. For example, if you're talking about the weather and want to say, "It's raining," but forget the word raining, you could say, "There's water falling from the sky," or, "It's wet outside." The more you practice this, the easier it will be to come up with alternative expressions when you need them. Another great way to improve your English flexibility is by using what you've learned in real-life situations. Try to practice speaking or writing in English as much as possible, especially in situations where you might need to explain things in different ways. If you're talking to someone and can't think of the exact word, don't panic. Use the words you do know to describe what you mean. Over time, this practice will help you become more comfortable with thinking in English and expressing yourself, even when you don't know all the words. You can also improve your flexibility by expanding your understanding of how English works. This means learning more about grammar and sentence structures so that you can build more complex and varied sentences. The more flexible your grammar and sentence structures are, the easier it will be to explain different ideas, even with a limited vocabulary. You can do this by reading a lot in English, paying attention to how sentences are constructed, and trying to use similar structures in your own speaking and writing. Another useful tip is to actively seek out opportunities to encounter new phrases and expressions. Watch movies, TV shows, or listen to podcasts in English, and pay attention to how native speakers phrase their thoughts. When you come across interesting or useful expressions, try to write them down and practice using them in your conversations. This will help you build a library of flexible phrases that you can use when you need them. Finally, it's important to practice thinking in English as much as possible. Instead of constantly translating from your native language, try to think directly in English. This might feel challenging at first, but it's one of the most effective ways to improve your language flexibility. When you think in English, you start to understand the language on its own terms, without always relying on translations. This will help you become more confident in your ability to express yourself in English, without needing to stop and think about how to translate your thoughts. Improving your flexibility in English doesn't happen overnight, but with consistent practice, you will see significant progress. By focusing on learning words deeply, practicing paraphrasing, using English in real-life situations, and thinking directly in English, you'll become a more flexible and confident communicator. The more flexible you become, the easier it will be to handle any conversation, no matter how complex or unfamiliar it might seem at first. In conclusion, developing flexibility in your English language skills is essential for effective communication. It goes beyond simply knowing a vast number of words. Instead, it focuses on how you can use the words you already know in creative and adaptable ways. This resourcefulness allows you to express yourself clearly, even when you encounter unfamiliar vocabulary. By building a strong foundation through a deeper understanding of words and their meanings, you can create a robust vocabulary that supports your communication. Practicing paraphrasing and thinking in English will enhance your ability to express complex ideas with ease. Real-life practice is crucial, as it helps you gain confidence and allows you to apply what you've learned in meaningful contexts. Moreover, seeking out opportunities to encounter new phrases and expressions will enrich your language experience. Watching movies, listening to podcasts, or engaging in conversations with native speakers can expose you to authentic language usage. By recording and practicing these expressions, you'll expand your repertoire, making it easier to navigate various communication situations. Remember, improving your language flexibility is a journey that requires consistent effort and practice. Embrace the learning process, celebrate your progress, and remain open to making mistakes along the way. Each challenge you encounter is an opportunity for growth. The more you engage with the language, the more natural it will become. Ultimately, the goal of learning English is not just to memorize vocabulary or grammar rules but to communicate effectively. By prioritizing flexibility and resourcefulness, you'll find that your confidence and ability to connect with others will flourish. As you continue on this journey, keep in mind that every step you take brings you closer to becoming a more skilled and versatile English speaker.